Welcome to Curious Life of a Child-Free Woman, a podcast celebrating unconventional choices and asking curious questions through the lens of a happy, child-free life. Every week, I chat with experts on today's most interesting topics, inspiring us to think differently, live intentionally, and find fulfillment on our terms. Whether you're child-free or seeking a space where parenthood isn't part of the conversation, you are welcome here. It's not about comparison, it's about possibility. Let's get curious together. What if health wasn't just about avoiding disease or living longer? What if we focused on health span over lifespan, prioritizing quality, purpose, energy, and fulfillment as we age? Today's guest, Dr. Koen Kas, believes that being truly well means having the energy, clarity, and courage to become the most epic version of yourself. He is a healthcare futurist, a professor of molecular oncology and digital health, and the author of several books, including his latest, Epic, which explores how we can use technology, creativity, and curiosity to live longer, more vibrant lives. At a time when so many of us are rethinking what we want life to look like in the later years or just the years ahead right now, Dr. Kaz offers a vision of health that's deeply personal and full of possibility. From AI companions to measuring delight as a health metric, he brings together science, imagination, and autonomy in a way that's refreshingly human. Welcome, Dr. Kaz.
Wow, Emily, this is one of the coolest entries ever, really. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, there's so many fun things I can say about you, so it makes it easy to introduce this in a fun way.
No, it's fantastic. Now, one disclaimer, people call me a futurist indeed. The only thing I cannot do, well, there's a lot of things I cannot do, but predicting the future, almost impossible. It's so hard. But I really believe, and that's one of the topics of the discussion, I hope, today, is that you can create a future. And that your audience and the people who are listening to this really should be inspired that you can build, sometimes even from a white page, something novel. And that's indeed why we came up with that delight thinking methodology we'll address in a few minutes, I guess.
Yes, I want to understand exactly what that term means and look ahead in a lot of different facets of what's going on with healthcare and how we can bring some of this within ourselves as individuals. But before we do that, I would love to understand more of how we got here. Can you tell us your story and how you got involved and so invested in the healthcare space?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm trained as a biomedic and started my career seeing cancer patients. With a fantastic team, we discovered the reason why some people develop pancreas cancer, why some people develop cancer of the ovary and cancer of the salivary glands. And so that made my academic career. And then with another fantastic team, I had the luxury to develop a medication to treat brain cancer in children. And in all honesty, more confronting than a child 6-year-old with brain cancer, it will probably never get. And the best thing we could do with these children, except, well, extending their life a bit, was sending them on a camp. And that camp was called Camp Delight. And that was the first time that I came the word delight across my background in trying to treat sick people. And my real changed completely, Emily, when I went for the first time to the west of China, something like 15 years ago, and discovered a very old healthcare model, more than 2000 years old, where at that time the doctor got paid as long as people in the village remained healthy. And once you got sick, you no longer had to pay. And I found that such a fascinating model that basically at that moment in time, I decided that instead of trying to help a number of cancer patients in the future, I would make it my mission trying to understand why we lost that Chinese model and trying to reinvent that from a white page. And that's what I've been doing for the last 10 years, trying to build a healthcare system where I try to die young, but as late as possible, because I pay my care system to keep me healthy. Change to what we do now. Now we get sick and we try to restore, repair things which are broken, right? Every $100 we spent $98 to the last 2 years of our life and less than $2 to prevention, which is crazy. So imagine that we revert that model. First of all, we make it again sustainable because healthcare is currently a completely unsustainable business. And We have ways to provide people a plethora of tools to maximize what they can do the time they spend here on Earth. Because you do not want to spend the last 10 years of your life without any quality of life. While you mentioned that lifespan is not important, but health span is. The day before you die, you still want to be healthy. And even that is something which we're going to discuss today, which I think we have to elevate. What I will try to introduce, how I think that we're not going to just keep people healthy, but that we're going to find out what their real potential is, that we will find out what their purpose is, because people who have purpose, they live longer. And if you live long, then you find ways to convert your potential in bringing the best version of yourself out. And in order to do that, I'll introduce the concept of delight in a second. But I'll pause here for a second as well.
That is fascinating. What you've seen through your work, I can only imagine, and working with cancer patients and especially children with cancer, that just pulls at our heartstrings even to hear it. But I have certainly not heard of that Chinese system or structure where it's completely proactive versus reactive, right? You're paying to stay healthy. And then if something goes wrong, you don't have to pay because that means something went wrong. Like that's a problem. And we have the complete opposite.
So the incentive for the care system is that you have to keep me healthy. And so in practice, what we do, and these are the topics we will discuss, first we have to understand why it worked in the past. So the Chinese doctor had 25 people in the village. He was 24/7 present in the village. So at the moment that Bernard or Diane got sick, he saw that something was coming, that I was got pale, that I got stomach pain, that I was not walking straight, that I was emotionally no longer stable, and he interfered immediately. Well, now, amazingly, I can send a package from where I live in Brussels to Chicago, and I can trace that package every 5 minutes using the FedEx or TNT or DHL website, which I find normal. But my average patient is 8,000 hours a year by himself or herself, not linked to me as a care provider. So a FedEx package is better off than my patient, and that is not normal. And that is what we're going to change with this entire wave of digital and AI. We're going to try to digitize the Chinese doctor of the past, and we're going to try to provide every patient, every citizen, all of us, a digital version of that Chinese doctor, a so called digital twin, which is 24/7 present with me digitally, so that at some point in time he might say, "Oh, Koen, I heard that you start to pronounce your vowels differently. That's bizarre." And you know what could be the reason? If you think about someone with Parkinson's disease, you recognize someone with Parkinson's disease because he has a tremor. You see, but 3 years before that happens, I start to lose the power, the muscle power around my neck. I start to pronounce my vowels differently. And all of a sudden, I have a tool now, an AI tool, which predicts Parkinson's 3 years in advance by just listening to a mic. And at that point in time, I can be treated. So all of a sudden, by entering into my life, and maybe at some point 24/7, let's discuss that afterwards, we will find ways to see things which are going off line, beyond baseline, and we have time to correct. Let me give you a second example, if I may. If I look to my genetic material, which is the biggest present I ever got from my parents, it's the DNA, the genome, the 3 billion code which defines who I am. Apparently, when I looked to my code, I found out that I'm predisposed to get an eye disease and to get blind, which is for me the worst which could happen. But Emily, I have superpower because I changed two things in my life. I started to take one supplement which delays the degradation of the back of my eye and which avoids that I have to eat 15 kilograms of broccoli and carrots each day, which I cannot. And I start to use the very first AI tool which we ever brought to the market. It's a US-based tool, it's called IDX, and it uses the smartphone camera to scan the back of my eye, which I cannot do, which a doctor cannot do. But by doing that on a monthly basis, I see whether the blood vessels in the back of my eye are still fine. If something starts to change, I can be treated. If I wouldn't notice, At some point in time, it's end of game because I turn blind. So I use one piece of information, biology, to use technology to change something in my lifestyle and to basically prevent me from getting blind. And that's part of the discussion we will have today. I'm going to show you how many things we are able to measure, where we will find out whether people are willing to be measured, yes, no. But by showing what is feasible, we will be able to provide people with an armatorium of tools, which in the background, almost invisibly, can be used to become the healthiest version of yourself without even needing a doctor. But by being able to use tech around where I live, in my home, in my family, in the fitness club, wherever I come, to keep me healthy and to basically be around with the Chinese doctor. And a model which I always try to refer to because it's a movie a lot of people have seen. It's a Disney movie called Big Hero 6. It's something I really recommend people to see. It's about 5 friends which get to know a sixth marshmallow inflatable dog, the Baymax. And Baymax lives in a very small tiny box in my home. And now and then, bloops, he jumps out, comes to me and asks, Koen, how are you? Are you doing okay? How do you feel? And basically, I'm pushing his belly, indicate using emoticons how I feel, good, bad. And basically, he teaches me, informs me about things I didn't realize I could do to stay healthier for the longer time. And these things he shows me are so nice, are so even sexy that it becomes fun to adopt them, that it becomes fun to stay healthy. Because we know basically what it takes to stay healthy, but it's hard to live that life. Think about moving off. On one hand, you should advise people try to move 20 minutes a day. And if you're really busy, do 40 minutes, right? So we have a lot of tools, nudging tools, to motivate people to do that. So, for instance, one tiny tool is using Netflix to program the favorite character from your favorite series as a coach on your smartphone. And only if you have moved enough today, if you've done enough exercise, you can watch the next episode of your favorite series already. So you see something which is such a cool experience. You don't feel like I had to oblige you to walk. No, you did it naturally because in return, you could see something before I could see it. And that is what this entire delight thinking is about. We use delight thinking to make sure that changing lifestyle, that adopting technology, that using data and AI becomes something which provides me so cool experiences. That is the life I want to live. A few years ago, a festival started in Cardiff in Wales, and that festival was called Before I Die. And people got asked, what do you want to do before you die? And always, again, Emily, it was three things. People want to leave a legacy, a company, a patent, an ID, a name. Some people, a child, and that's one, legacy. Two, people want to belong. You do not want to die alone, even if it's with any stew, but you want to be part of something, right? That's also logical. And the third thing was fascinating. The majority of people do not regret the life they've lived, but the majority of people regret the experiences they haven't had. And for that reason, delight thinking is providing people experiences based on things they didn't realize, based on unknown unknowns. And that was in my hands the trick to start changing healthcare system from people saying we're not going to change because we do it already for 2000 like this, like, oops, if you sell delight, I might be able to listen. And by the way, in order to bring delight, we use tech somewhere in the background. And that's in short what I do for a living.
Oh my gosh. The purpose behind your work, this sounds so exciting as a consumer, like as a potential patient. And I want to get into the details of all of this digital piece, but let's start with delight. I love that word. I've never heard that used in a scientific setting. I've used that in the world of marketing or in my career, and we used to talk about like surprise and delight the customer, which really meant go above their expectations and give them something they didn't even know was possible. They didn't even know they wanted it. And when we talk about health, and I look at stats or I hear things about the general population of America and how we're deficient in this and we don't move enough and we have all these problems, like what even is healthy? Are we living in a state where we don't even know how good we could feel? We don't even know how good it could get because we're not looking at this from like a reward and fun and delight point of view. We're looking at it as like restriction and sadness to do these quote unquote healthy things.
You nail it. We see healthcare as something which needs to correct something which by default goes wrong, which is absolutely crazy. You have to turn it upside down. We have to maximize the chance that with the time we spend here on Earth, we can do things we didn't even expect that we could do. In order to explain the light, I'll provide a number of examples that unknown unknowns. By the way, the unknown unknowns comes from Donald Rumsfeld. When he was Minister of Defense at 9/11, he mentioned that famous quote, "We, CIA, FBI, we know what we know." Sure. We also know what we do not know. Bin Laden is hiding somewhere, but we have no clue where he is. And then he made something fascinating. Our biggest threat/opportunity are the things we didn't realize, the unknown unknowns. And that is a very nice one. Because imagine that you go to a clinic and the clinic says, "No, you don't have to come to me, I come to you." That's not something I expected. There is a fascinating clinic in St. Louis, Missouri. It's called Mercy Virtual. It's a building like every hospital in the US, but at the inside, there is not a single bed and not a single patient. 600 patients are monitored using tech by real people in that hospital building while they remain at home. That's something where I say, that's interesting. They use technology to revert the system from going to the hospital to coming to me. But let me try to explain the delight. In south of France, there is a hospital where I will die. It treats cancer patients. But they have a wine list like in a 2-star restaurant. It's not because I'm going to die in your restaurant that I shouldn't be able to live a quality life till the end of my life. That's something you didn't expect to get. We have hospitals which basically they have to treat people with ugly pills, but the pill is hidden in a praline, in a piece of chocolate, and all of a sudden I'm being offered a piece of chocolate. Imagine a child needs to get an infuse, a Baxter. Around the infuse, we put a Superman or a Batman cast, and all of a sudden we give the child superpower, which is the same product, but we sell it differently. And so you can do that at different levels. We can do that super low level, but we can do that super high tech. During Corona, I gave my father a microphone. You buy these things from Amazon, from Google, from Apple, these loudspeakers where you do use voice tech to get things done. So I gave that to my father to tell him, "Daddy, it's time to take your medication," which he found cool but didn't like because he didn't like that Alexa, that Siri voice. So I've used technology which allows me, which allows you, your listeners, to use that in a second as well, to talk 2 minutes to your computer. And after 2 minutes, you can type whatever text which gets pronounced with your voice, which we added to the loudspeaker. And all of a sudden, at 5 o'clock, my father heard me say, "Daddy, it's time to take your medication." So I've used technology to make myself more human, right? To become a more empathic human being and basically to show that tech is not going to dehumanize us, it's going to make us more human. But we have to find the ways to use it in the back and basically to get things done we couldn't do in the past. And for that, I use this delight thinking to provide people with experiences they didn't expect to get based on unknown unknowns. And each time we delete a friction. And if you get all frictions out of sick care, then you no longer get sick. And we're going back to that very old care model.
Let's talk more about these digital touch points that you're mentioning. And I'm glad that you just said we're going to use it to make us more human, because I do think that's a fear people have. We've had conversations here about AI, and on the one hand, there's so much embracing of AI and we're excited about the ways it can save us time and make things easier and take tasks off of our plate. And then I think there is also this fear around AI and privacy and data. And is it just going to turn us all into these kind of vegetables that don't know how to critically think because the machines do all that for us? But everything you're describing is the exact opposite. And that example that you gave with your father is so sweet. And I can picture that, right? That makes complete sense to me. And what a gift that you could give him that technology and your voice all in one. So tell us, how does this actually work? How do we use AI outside of that example to actually get this personal touch you've been sharing?
If you look to one of the diseases everybody knows is diabetes, right? Diabetes is a disease where basically I get too much sugar in my blood because of very often diet, too less movement. My heart needs to beat faster because my blood gets more viscous. And basically, what is going to happen at the end, I'm going to lose my eyesight, I turn blind, and I'm going to lose my kidney. That's basically the scope of diabetes patients. So imagine in this call, in your next Teams call or Zoom call, you all of a sudden get a question: Emily, can I take a video selfie while we talk for 5 seconds? You might say no, but imagine you say yes. The AI can look to your face and basically it sees the small blood vessels in your cheeks. Now, they have a certain color, right? But people who become diabetic, they have basically a heart which needs to beat faster because it's more viscous. And they basically have cheeks which are a little bit more reddish. The AI can detect that. So I might be asked, Koen, I see that you might develop diabetes. Are you willing to be coached to prevent this from happening? And I still might say no. But if I say yes, all of a sudden, you have used one entry point in my real life. I do Zoom call each day to have at least a coaching opportunity to tell me something, right? A second example. It's a company in Germany acquired by one of the biggest medtech companies now, also US-based Medtronic. They developed is an algorithm which proves that if you look to the movement of my wrists using my Apple Watch or whatever kind of wearable, you can find out what I'm drinking. This is a Coke, this is a coffee, this is the tea. And based on my wrist movement, they can find out that I'm drinking sugar, Coke, and they would be able to suggest me maybe cool instead of the Coke, take a glass of water. You might find that invading, right? But imagine that I'm a diabetic patient, which knows that's what is going to happen if I am not being helped, coached by with changing something in my lifestyle, then I have less chance to stay healthy or revert back to normal than someone who's willing to be coached. And so only by looking to one disease, we start to see that we have touch points all across life of individual using MRS, using voice, using the errors I make in my emails, using the way I put my feet on the ground, that you can provide predictors which I can use to get options not to go into the disease route, but stay into the healthy route. And that is, I think, where AI will become the Chinese doctor, which is in time to provide me the option and which uses the delight to change something and help me from going the disease route, if you like. And it's amazing what is possible. It's like looking to the eye is an indicator for brain health. The eye is part of my brain. It's the only part of my brain which sits at the outside. So it's not unlogical that watching the eye provides indications in emotional behavior, into mental things. Part of my brain is defined by how you look through my eyes. The way I pronounce things, the way I write errors or type errors on my smartphone could be indicators for something like Alzheimer's in the future. And then you might argue, well, people don't want to know. Yeah, people do want to know because I can basically delay Alzheimer's by showing me to learn some extra mobile numbers by heart. Majority of people know max 3 mobile numbers by heart. If you know 3 by heart, do me a pleasure. Try to learn 3 more mobile numbers by heart by next week, and you have made your brain 6 months younger. Or do some extra sudokus. So these are super simple, small things, which if I don't know, I'm not doing it. If you tell me what is feasible, I'm happy to learn and to adopt. So many things, Emily, that even if people say 50% I don't like, the remaining 50% you might like. And we have the opportunity to start playing and providing people really a playground of things to stay healthier longer and even till the end of their life.
Wow. I love the word playground that you just used there. And I think you're right. A lot of people do want to know. It can be scary. And even what you mentioned before with genetics. And I've considered some genetic testing. And then you second guess, like, do I want to know? And what will that do to me and how I view my life if I do know? But ultimately, of course, I want this knowledge. Knowledge is power. It gives me the opportunity to do something new. So, where are we with the development of these technologies? Those tangible examples are so helpful in thinking about imagery and voice and video and how that can help us. Is this accessible to people? Are there different individual companies? Do you think there's going to be like one company that kind of does it all and is a huge AI resource for health? Where are we with the release of these technologies?
A super important question. Incidentally, one of the most famous on the word used wearables in the US is called Whoop, WHOOP, and it looks to a number of my lifestyle parameters. Now, incidentally, the FDA, which is basically regulating medication, which is now also regulating medical devices, went to Whoop 2 weeks ago and said, look, guys, you mentioned that your Whoop bracelet is able to measure blood pressure. But in all honesty, you shouldn't do that because you haven't proven that the Whoop is a medical device which is good enough to measure blood pressure. That has basically raised a huge amount of questions whether, in order to provide insights in who I am, we should use medical grade stuff or whether it's good enough to do consumer stuff. That is partially an answer to your question. There is not one single company, but there is two big routes towards the same future. On one hand, it's the consumer thinking, where people said if we help the consumer seeing trends, based on the trends, you can already guide. And there is the classical care system, which says a trend is not good enough. We want to have hard, wild data. So for that reason, already 7 years ago, me and my team, we started to curate a database of certified health apps. So these are health apps which are regulated, which are trusted by medics and hospitals, and can be trusted to be used to have high quality measurements. Having said so, it's not because something is not medical grade that it's not useful. A number of things will never get medical grade and are still useful. To give you one example, in order to help me with some emotional issues, what I always prescribe to people, it's an app called ClearMind, ClearMind Plus. And ClearMind asks Koen, what is bothering you now? Oh, what's bothering me? My exams, which are upcoming, the fact that my mother is no longer able to live independently at home. There is a divorce in the family. And I tell ClearMind. And after 50 minutes of listening or typing, ClearMind suggests me one song to listen, one movie to watch, and one podcast to listen to. Now, I think there is 6
Wow.
billion songs. There's 4 billion movies. But the song and the movie it will suggest, Emily, will give you goosebumps. Because that will be a song or a movie made by an artist which went to the same issues as you. Art is very often emotion, right? That is so much of a helping hand, but is not something regulated, but replaces my Psy, for which I have a waiting list of 6 months. And that thing basically is one of the hundreds of examples which we curate and where we have lists of things which are top to use but not certified, and a list of roughly 300 apps and medical devices which are regulated by the FDA and which are ready to use and can be accessed by the medical provider. What changed just a few years ago, till roughly 3, 4 years ago, a doctor said, I don't like these data, I don't trust these data because they come from the consumer, I don't have access to this data. Then something changed all of a sudden. A simple Fitbit, that's a Google product by the way, now has an API, it has a piece of software which makes that the data coming from the Fitbit can be uploaded in my medical records in the clinic. So my doctor can no longer deny having access to my data. And so what I want as a patient or a citizen, I want a doctor which is not waiting till I get sick with diabetes, but a doctor which sees that he can access my amount of steps I take and can try to become my coach, my motivator, to motivate me to walk a little bit more in order not to get sick. I think the big turning point will come. This entire wave of longevity clinics you start to see at every corner of every street are looking to measure things. They screen things in my blood. They screen things with scanners. But I think the real task they have at hand is to show me the apps, the tools, the design ideas, the nudging behavior tools to simply help me 365 days a year to a little bit adapt parts of my life without me feeling that as a hassle, but feeling that as an experience. And that will keep me really healthy for the longest possible time. And then to give you an idea what can be done, it's by measuring every vital parameter you can do with a smartphone or a bracelet. You can do the echo at home. You can scan the moles, the brown moles on your skin, which might turn into some skin cancer, and send them to your dermatologist at home. We can do the pap smear to look for cervical carcinoma on the smartphone now. And there is two ways now. The second is called the wand. It looks like a small sex toy, but it's a toy which I use to enter my vagina, which takes a small sample, prepares a sample to do the cervical analysis. And the other one is an extension underneath the smartphone. So I take a swab, put it on a small piece of glass under the smartphone, and the smartphone looks like a microscope into the sample and does do the analysis itself.
That is unbelievable.
Fantastic. Eh? My toilet has a scanner and it beams through my urine beam to find out whether my kidneys are still doing fine. I have the first device now which scans my sleep at home. I no longer have to go to a sleep clinic. A lot of women's husband having sleep apnea, men don't want to go to the clinic because it's annoying, 2 days, waiting list of 6 months. So you can measure these things at home. Even Apple Watch has a toy which is now approved to measure sleep apnea at home. So it becomes self-care. And so we start to have the tools as a citizen, which if my doctor is not doing it, to be able to start measuring things myself and to know myself in a better way. And therefore, in order to analyze these things, the reason why this entire AI business is so exciting is because people start to question that if a doctor, which is basically a human being, but which is outdated because everything we learned at school is outdated the day after he leaves school. And every day we have thousands of novel publications. My AI is always up to date. So why should I even be treated by a doctor? And please don't tell me that the doctor is not more empathic. I don't believe so. I think I know a lot of cancer doctors which are fantastic in their job, but as a human interaction, they suck. Excuse me. So I think that the entire potential of tech really has entered a point where we have all the bits and pieces to start building that model of digital twins. I'm a European guy, of course. I have the honor to work with something like 50 different labs in Europe, which are preparing the launch of that concept of providing every European a twin in less than 4 years from now. And that's no longer science fiction. We are almost ready to do that. And that is the most fascinating time to be alive, I think.
This is unbelievable. My mind is blown with possibilities. And I feel like we talk all the time. We put so much pressure on the individual now to be our own advocate. We use that word a lot. Like, be your own advocate at the doctor's office, keep pushing, go out and book that appointment, find that extra specialist, get the second opinion. And we want to be empowered with our healthcare, but those things are exhausting. And it feels like such an uphill battle sometimes of confrontation. And how do we have the time to find the resources? We don't know where to go. We don't know what to do. And yet we don't want to just acquiesce all of our power. So all these things you're talking about that give us access to understand our own bodies in a much more in-depth way, that feels amazing.
Yeah. I guess you've seen that. There is a super simple patch. It's called Freestyle, but you have a lot of competitors now. It's a small patch. It's a penny size. It sticks to my arm for 2 weeks. And it measures the impact of what I eat on my sugar level and my glucose level. And of course, you know what a white piece of bread versus a brown piece means, but if you see it visually, how big the difference is, it helps to say maybe brown is better. Or ketchup. If you want to have the biggest sugar source, it's ketchup. And if I tell you, yeah, you say sure, but if you see it in a spike going up, it helps to reinvent the ketchup, if you like. So sometimes measuring is seeing, measuring is knowing, measuring is believing, but measuring also allows you to start doing something with it. And just like you have something like Whoop, a lot of women are wearing because it can be designed in a very Gucci style, and you have a L'Oreal one as well. Now, incidentally, one of them, the glucose measurement companies, it's called Dexcom, and just made a deal so that you can start to measure two things which initially were in two silos, combine them so that you could tell me, Koen, fine to drink the Coke, fine to eat the sugary thing, all fine, but take a few extra steps, walk the extra mile. That compensates basically the sugar. An interesting concept I also would like to bring to the table, Emily, if I may. Finally, to start thinking about healthcare as something which is holistically to be seen. So it's not just my physical health, it's not just my mental health, but it's also my emotional health, my spiritual health, my financial health you have to take care for. And you might argue, well, what can we do there? Let me give you two examples, if I may. For instance, if you would have asked me or told me, Koen, breathe in and out quietly because that makes you sleep better, makes you more mindful. Till a few years ago, I couldn't do that. After 3 times breathing in deep, I was already forgetting that I was doing it. I was thinking about something else. What I have is something called it's Moomber, a kind of a hand vibrator, which basically expands the seconds I have to breathe in, and it's small, it collapses the seconds I have to breathe out. And in 2 weeks' time, it has learned me how I breathe well. And it has made me a better sleeper. It has made me more mindful. So I want to have the doctor, which is not prescribing pills, but prescribing that hand vibrator. That's one example. Second, they started to do it in Montreal in Canada. Instead of treating mental issues with pills, I get a subscription to go to the museum because some people are healed by watching art. That's one of the chapters in my book, by the way. Art is healing. Now, we start to see companies which use AI to find out which is the art Emily likes to make her restful, to inspire her, to feel more creative. And that piece of art might be something completely different than it is for me, right? But all art is something which should be part of the armatorium of the doctor. If I would have said that 3 years ago, they would have said you should stop doing your practice. Now, if I look to Stanford University, they have a class lifestyle medicine, not kidding. And one of the things they learn me, besides moving well, eating well, sleeping well, becoming mindful, is finding purpose. And incidentally, that is what my book also is about. But if we start to see that keeping people healthy is not just making super people, but with all my handicaps, with my inabilities, with even if I'm disabled, I can still become epic. It's not because I have no legs that I cannot reach my fullest potential, but help me with that. Rather than seeing things which I cannot do, help me seeing what is feasible. For instance, one of the things I describe in the book is AI to start doing that as well. And one of the things which I guess your listeners might love, it's a tool called Wanderer.space. And Wanderer asks, Koen, what are your hobbies? Or what are your interests, XYZ? And it links that to my LinkedIn account. And after 15 minutes, it suggests one or two jobs which also might fit my interests. And when I did for myself, it came with molecular gastronomy chef. I even hadn't heard about the job, but it told me these are the people do it. They earn that much. That's where they live. That's where they work. And when I looked at it, Emily, it was like, wow, yeah, that could have been me as well because I like X and Y and Z. Someone has to help me in teaching that. So imagine that my doctor finds out the fact that you are barely close to burnout is because you're doing something which is barely not what you're made for. But let me help you, even in the company you're at, to find something which is way more suited to you. How cool would that be? That's basically helping me to really not just do what I like. It's not about what I like, but what I'm good at, what helps. That motivates. And that sees that I'm being looked at for what I work. And so that's where the entire idea of linking potential and linking purpose, I think, fits in very, very nicely. Think about it, how they are interlinked. If I find purpose, I live longer. If I find potential, I find my purpose. If I'm healthy, I can reach my purpose. And if I'm healthy, I'm around longer to reach my full potential. Full circle.
Beautiful. Why does the purpose piece, scientifically, why does that help us live longer, regardless of whether we're sedentary and what we're eating and all of those pieces? How does purpose come into play physiologically?
I think 80 years old, the psychologist, the European one, Viktor Frankl, has looked to see what gives people meaning. And apparently it was three things: being artistic and creative. And that's logical, because if you're creative, you encounter the same issues as someone else. But instead of saying, oh, I'm divorcing, oh, my boss is lousy, they find ways around it. They say, well, I find a creative solution. Maybe my boss is fine if I do something else for him, right? So creativity helps you to see opportunities. And art, which is creativity, helps you to get there. That's one. Two, it's seeing beauty and seeing nature. And for a large amount of years, that was completely denied. Now, the US Army has built a number of big forests for soldiers coming back from war zones to bring their families there with PTSD to detoxify themselves, to use the forests to become at rest. In Japan, we have something like forest bathing. It's really sending people not in a bath, but in the forest. We have tree hugging. 5 years ago, people that have said tree hugging, that's not something medical. That starts to become part of our medical armatorium. So that's number two. And the third thing, he discovered people who learn to become resilient, they find purpose easier, which is also logical, of course, because if you think about human beings, do you know what the most creative age is of us, of men and women? Any idea?
No. I would guess a young age, but I don't know.
Yeah, that's what the majority of people think, young age. It's 48. And you know where it comes from? They've looked to all the Nobel Prizes, chemistry, physics, medicine, not to the time when they get the prize, then they're almost dead, but to the moment that they do the invention. 48. And why is that? Because you need to have gray hair, well, men have gray hair, to be able to fail, to be able to connect the dots. If you're 20, there's hardly a dot you can connect, right? You have to reach a certain age to see things which worked, which didn't, to learn from failure and to turn failure into successes. And I think that even if you look to companies like Google or Facebook, people say, that's a young guy who founded it, sure. But the company became big when elderly or older became part of Facebook, or when Smith became part of Google. So they also needed the gray hair, the extra background. So these three things, being able to become creative, looking to beauty and to the nature, becoming resilient, that apparently helps to live longer. And to live longer and to find purpose, we start to feel that there is something which helps if we can leave legacy. It seems that if we can help people getting experiences, not just ourselves experiencing something, but if others benefit from our experience, that gives the most satisfaction. And that is what I described in the book in Epic, that you have to strive trying to get experiences which basically are at the end of your life where you say it was a life worth living, but experiences where others benefit from as well. And I'm going to try to illustrate and make it simpler, Emily, and also explain the concept of epic. We're using my mother. My mother is getting 90 now, 90, and she got diabetes 4 or 5 years ago. And my brother and myself tried to help her by saying, Mom, we're going to manage it. We're going to change something in the diets. We'll manage. But that was almost a lost game. It didn't work at all. And so at some point in time, I told her people with diabetes, what they're going to encounter is they get blind. That's happening now. they're also going to lose their kidney because the kidney fails. You have to go on dialysis. After 5 years, that no longer works. And when I told her that, saying that dialysis requires that we will have to go to the hospital a few times a week, then something clicked in her brain because she realized that if that would be true, then she would be a hassle for her two sons because we had to bring her to the hospital. Me and my brother are her heroes, and she's looking to give us the maximum chance to strive. So she doesn't want to be the hassle. All of a sudden, one of the points where I said, wow, if that is what makes people tick, then I think we have found something to really build a completely new healthcare system from scratch. Because then it's not about curing diabetes, it's about giving other people the chance to have the best possible experience. And that is, I think, where our complete rethink is going to happen. That sick care is something we can solve going back to healthcare, but the real magic will come by asking me, what is it that you really dream of? And instead of saying, you have to walk more, you have to drink less, you have to sleep more, let me reach my dream, because that is something I'm willing to live for.
How do you help people who hear that and they feel like they don't know what that is? If we ask them to define their purpose or explain their wildest life dream, I've met a lot of people who feel like, I don't know. I can't articulate that. I don't know if it's because I don't have time to think about it. How do you help people kind of tune into that within themselves?
Yeah, that's a really super question. There is a number of digital tools which help based on questions you ask. You might have heard from companies like Neuralink, which build brain computer interfaces. We start to be able, in people which are paralyzed, to enter with some, well, wires and with some sensors and reach parts of the brain where visualization happens and help them visualize watching the brain activity, what they cannot mention because they cannot talk. And so that same kind of concept, trying to watch people's dreams, which I maybe cannot explain, but they can make drawings. These are things which we try to bring by reverse engineering back to the basics. What do we have to find out where the things we dream about, which we didn't realize, but which are subconsciously there, how can we get them out of people? And there start to become tools for that to help people with exactly that. And sometimes it's showing little movies. That's one of my guilty pleasures, is watching these reels on Instagram. And there's such fascinating movie. There's two. And I think by explaining it, people will be able to find it. But there's one where you see a little girl, which I think is asked by her parents to play soccer, which tries to hit the ball and she fails completely. You see her being disappointed, and afterwards she turns 5 times backwards as the best gymnast to go back to the site. So she has to become a gymnast. If I show that little movie to people, they say, oh, I encounter myself in that as well. Once I tried X, but I discovered that I was much better in Z. And another little movie is a guy who sits on a bike. The wheels are squares. So obviously he cannot ride because a bike is made. But then you see all of a sudden a wooden panel on the ground, and that wooden panel contains a number of curves, and they put the guy with the square wheel bike on that, and all of a sudden he gets through the curves and he moves faster than the guy on the normal bike. So sometimes it's not changing myself, it's changing the environment I'm at. And so by these two visuals, Emily, I've been able to help already a lot of people to see what they no longer didn't see. And sometimes it's simply that it's helping people with some time to talk, to discuss, to let them talk, and to help them seeing things which they thought they would never ever been able to see any longer. And that's again where the human part plays a role. I'm not ashamed to tell that. Very often use AI tools now just to get inspired and to expand the number of options I have to deal with someone else and to find the best way to show him or her what potential and what purpose really means. There is nothing wrong by using a machine, I think, as good as we are in coming up with permutations, because it just looks to different combinations of things. But if then all of a sudden there sits something where I say that will help for my friend, which seems to have already 3 years a hard time because the relation is bad, to see where the potential is, she feels stuck. Maybe feeling stuck is providing people a different viewpoint. And what the book describes is that different viewpoints are not just given by talking to people, but by also using tech and discovering what is really hidden in who I am.
I love the combination of both the human interaction and what you described by just letting someone speak, being a listener, and then almost being a mirror sometimes to reflect the things we can't even see in what we just said. That combined with all of these incredible technological tools, it's so exciting to think about the potential synergy.
Yeah, and sometimes it's also simple. There was a fantastic TED talk, I forgot her name, a lady with digital studies to people who often are being called, you always seem to be happy. Also, there are three rules which come back, and it ties into the discussion we just had. A lot of people, while waiting for the train or the plane, they watch their smartphone, right? You go to the person next to you, say, I'm going to Geneva, who are you? And maybe they find you a freak, the chance is little. They might become your next boss, your next publisher, your next colleague. So by daring to talk, I take the risk, but I might discover something better than what I currently discover. By just watching on smartphone, I will not discover. So one is taking risk. Two, and again, super obvious, but hard. I interviewed with you for a job. I didn't get a job. You didn't hire me. But I sent you a letter, Emily, thanks that I could be interviewed, that I was invited for coming for the interview. That letter you will never forget. And maybe you didn't need me now, but maybe you need me in 3 years from now. So I failed because I didn't get a job. But I turned to failure in something you remember. And that's the second rule. So find your purpose by maximizing your chance, right? And the third one, super simple, but the hardest, especially in Europe. I know something, I keep that for myself. Oh, don't do that. Pay it forward. If you know something, tell it to other people. Because at some point in time, it hits a need, it hits an argument, it gets feedback, and all of a sudden, you enrich yourself with viewpoints from others. It says, I'm not saying what I'm developing. Please believe me, there's 55 people thinking exactly the same thing as what you're doing now. It's not about thinking, it's about execution. Execution helps if you take the risk, if you dare to fail. And if you look to one of the most famous current entrepreneurs in Europe, Stephen Bartlett in the UK, CEO, if you hear him talk, I met him last week, the only thing he teaches people is daring to fail. In his company, he has a chief failure officer. And that's true in human life as well. We shouldn't fail because of we fail. We should be able to live with failure by or either becoming more creative so we can deal with things, by rethinking the use of our time so that in the same amount of time we can test way more things and can discover that maybe being a doctor was not my best choice. And instead of saying, let's do that for the next 30 years because I spent 7 years in school, that I should reinvent myself and do the next 30 years something completely different.
So much rich self-development there. And we've been talking about this health span and how we want to feel through all of these eras of our life. And I love that you shared all of that because to me, if we're focused on taking risks, sharing with others, doing things that are memorable, seeking purpose, even if we don't know exactly what it means yet, just by nature of doing those things and having those mindsets, we are living a life well lived, right? Without having to sit here and think, oh, I got to make sure I love every single moment until I'm dead and putting that pressure. Focus on the positives, which you said from the start, this idea of delight and the joy in living that way.
Absolutely. And so longevity is not about lifespan, not about health span. It's really about the quality of our life and experiences. And I think the new metric should be fullness. I had a full life. And people are not just sick. You want to feel vital, resilient, and in control. And we start to have the tools to help people get in there. And I think the doctor of the future helps me to find purpose and keeps me healthy. And then we go back to the old model, and that's full circle. And I think this is the best time to be alive because we start to be able to offer that to people as we speak. And in an individual basis, some people might say, well, this is what I need. We're going to be able to provide care, Emily, in a super precise, personalized, empathic fashion, decentralized, and not just where you think care comes from, but where you are. Because if you're around your partner, you need something else than when you're with your friends. You need something else than when you're on holidays. You need something else than when you're on the company. And so, in a very personalized fashion, we'll be able to provide people with the tools to maximize their potential.
You've painted a picture of a future that I definitely want to live in. I want all of these things you're sharing to come to fruition. For everybody listening, what can we do as individuals to help make this a reality?
I think very often change is difficult for a lot of people. And in healthcare, change seems to be difficult because people say we've been doing it for so long. Why should we change? It's too risky. It's too expensive. It takes too much of my time. I don't have the time. So I think the best thing we can do is tell people what you've heard now. I heard this guy talking about, did you know that? No. Are you interested? And spreading the words. And basically, that's what I try to do for a living, is provide keynotes all across the planet to inspire people, not just by something fluffy, this is going to happen, but by providing them 50 real examples where maybe 47 are not relevant for you, but three things you take home and you spread the news and inspire three other people. A Ponzi scheme of goodness. So I think that is one of the best things you could do, is telling news and spreading news. And that's why I was so happy to be on your podcast, to have a small, tiny forum to reach people, which I hope have learned one tiny thing which could be relevant in their life.
I know that they have. I have learned so much. I can't wait. I'm so grateful this is recorded and it will be published because I'm going to listen to this again. There's so much here and it really is inspiring. And I think it's hard to get inspired and feel really optimistic about things related to healthcare, which is a shame. So the work that you're doing is going to open minds, change perspectives, and then ultimately reshape an industry. It's absolutely incredible.
I believe so too. And it's basically all our responsibility, because you're not in healthcare, that you will play a role. Every company will become a healthcare company or an educational company. The only two things we need to have right, and what you do with podcast is one of them, that's education. That's our health and teaching the next generation. And incidentally, one of the women coming from the Walton family launched a clinic 2 weeks ago in Arkansas, in the States. And they're going to offer a class for medics. And you know what they're going to teach them? Prevention, not kidding. So it's a retailer which sees that future. And for instance, I think you're going to see hotels, you're going to see companies which you do not associate with healthcare entering healthcare big time. Best Buy in the US is a fantastic example. Consumer electronics company, which currently watches 300,000 people living individually in the US separately by being monitored by technology from Best Buy. Best Buy is a healthcare company, and these kind of things.
It's happening already all around us.
So if there would be people in your audience which can provide me a floor, a stage somewhere to talk, I would love it.
Yes. Oh my gosh. I will be recommending you to anyone and everyone I know who has fellow podcast communities, platforms. This is a message that I am now passionate about, and I'm happy to amplify it. Dr. Kas, before I let you go, is there any important topic we haven't discussed that we should?
One thing, it will take too long, but I think we have found a solution for dealing with data, because the biggest fear people have is what happens with my data. If I'm pre-cancer, not telling someone because my insurer will no longer give me insurance. So there is solutions which are ready to enter the market. And one of the solutions, invented initially by a professor at MIT in Cambridge, has been adapted by my country as the first country to provide people a secret store on the internet, but in a decentralized fashion. So what you're going to see the end of this year, early next year, is the possibility that your data are no longer going to Google or Facebook or the government, that you can get a personal online data store yourself. You can define who gets access to that store so that you can also be rewarded for things you share. And so just like you have as sportsmen, which make advertisements for Red Bull, Emily is going to advertise Emily and John is going to advertise John, because all of us are unique and all of us have things no one else has. So that value should be rewarded. And you're going to see tools where people will help to deal with privacy, with trust, to help build the world I've tried to explain. And I think that's the most important word in the discussion we had the last hour. Delight is important, but trust is the most important one. Because as long as I trust you, we can change the world from a white page, starting with the two of us. If I lose trust, it's no longer possible. It's end of game. So try to make sure that you basically sell trust. Selling trust makes that people have a hopeful way to the future, and hope is the best selling product on the planet. And if we can start to show that there is hope, that we can live a life where we die as late as possible, then I think everybody has an extra reason to be on this planet.
I love it. For everybody who wants to learn more from you and continue to be in your world, where is the best place for them to connect?
Oh, on LinkedIn. That's the best.
And we'll make sure that all of your links to everything, including your new book, are included in the show notes. And I also want to make sure, I think people are going to have questions about that list you mentioned, like the devices that you recommend. Where can we find that list?
Till a few weeks ago, this list was completely open on our website. But since what's happened now with WHOOP and the FDA, we have taken the list offsite for a few weeks, and we are adding a section, the tool, applicable into the field of longevity, because we think that we can help a lot of longevity initiatives, clinics all across the world with having access to this list. So I cannot provide access as we speak, but the list will be up and running again. The website of my team, and we're called Health Scouts. And so what we do, we scout worldwide for any novel tech development, app development, curate that, qualify that, and that's open on our website, and it's called Health Scouts. But let people start following me on LinkedIn, that's fine. And the book is accessible via Amazon.
Thank you so much for spending this time with us. I feel informed, I feel uplifted, and really excited about the future.
The honor is mine. All the best with all the fantastic things you do.
Thank you so much. Thank you for listening. Now I want to hear what you learned. DM me on Instagram at Curious Life of a Child-Free Woman, or leave a review with your top takeaway. These ratings really do make a difference. If you're not a member of the Curious Life Club yet, you are invited. Visit CuriousLifeOfAChildFreeWoman.com to join the conversation, share suggestions, and be first to know the next curious topic. I appreciate you, and I'll see you next week.